Beautiful, as always, to be here with you. As always, I feel my heart just kind of, oh, it's Wednesday night. We're with the Sangha. And it's just a sweet time of nourishment and a sweet time to take a moment and just be grateful. And so if you are on gallery or want to go to gallery and just take a look around and enjoy being here with these kind and kindred friends, kind and kindred spirits. It's always a nourishing thing to do. So, friends, I thought that this week we would continue on from last week. Well, we've been looking at the 7 factors of awakening. And these are just almost one of my favorite lists because they invite us into active participation in awakening. Often, sometimes I think I wish there was something to do in meditation. Sometimes it feels like, we're just sitting back, we're just being receptive. But these 7 factors of awakening invite us into what we can do. It frames our practice in a very active way. And it gives us, and the 7 factors of awakening are in the 4th foundation of mindfulness. The first foundation we know is these are the kind of the areas where we cultivate capacity to bring our mindfulness. The first is the mindfulness of the body. The second, mindfulness of Vedana, or that is our whether we have kind of a preference for pleasant, whether we find something pleasant or unpleasant or neither. That place where we could have some reactivity. The third foundation is the emotions and thoughts. This is the mind. And then the 4th foundation is how we work with these first 3 foundations actively. The 4th foundation is inviting us now into active processes that can liberate the mind and the heart. And there are 2 lists in the 4th foundation, 2 areas we look at. One area is the area of difficult states, which are the hindrances. And our tasks there, our active tasks that we're invited into are, can we know, first of all, when a hindrance is present and when it's absent? Then can we know how to abandon the hindrances, abandon the difficult states? And we looked at the hindrances a little bit in detail in August. And now the 7 factors of awakening are the wholesome states, the awakening states, and our tasks here, again, are to know when they're present or when they're absent. And then our task is to know how they rise, how to support their rising, these 7 factors of awakening, and then how to sustain them. And if we can sustain and balance them in our mind, in our heart, our experience, then the mind inclines towards awakening all by itself. And so our task is to know how to cultivate these factors. That's our job. That's the active part. How do we cultivate them? How do we know when they rise? How do we know when to support them? And then we can rest back and let them do the work. I often say if we do the practice will do the work for us. And this is one way of saying that. Another image I like is of a garden. When we have a garden, we need to cultivate the garden, cultivate the soil, plant the seeds in the right conditions, the conditions of sunlight and rain. And then when we plant the garden will do the growing. That garden will grow all by itself. And so what we're doing is planting the seeds. We're cultivating the conditions for the 7 factors of awakening in the mind. And this is a sutta from the Satipatthana Sutta, which is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And the Buddha is talking in the fourth foundation about these factors. And he says, how does a person practice with the factors of awakening? And here he's going to point to the two tasks we've got, or two of the tasks, the things we can do. One is that, first of all, a practitioner discerns the presence and absence of the seven factors. Is it present in my mind or absent? And then they discern how they arise. And then they discern how they can develop the factors. So we're going to take a look at these three tasks tonight, these three activities we can do in relation to the seven factors of awakening. And the seven factors are mindfulness, this is the first one. And then there's three that are energizing. That is investigation, energy itself, and joy, quiet joy. And then these lead to the three factors that are calming. And these three factors are calm, concentration, equanimity. And so last week we started to look at equanimity and how we can cultivate equanimity. So this week I'm going to we'll finish our exploration of equanimity, and do that in conjunction with mindfulness. So bring the two of those together. And so I'm going to lead a meditation now, a guided meditation that's going to talk about or bring in these factors, the factor of mindfulness and the factor of equanimity, and maybe some of the other seven factors. And this first, we'll bring in mindfulness for sure, because we'll do mindfulness meditation. But it's nice to see the mindfulness that we bring in the context of the seven factors of awakening. We practice mindfulness every Wednesday night. And sometimes now I feel like we practice mindfulness, we can say, to be in contact with the breath, to be in contact with the body, to be in contact with this present moment, to cultivate some calm. But in the that's all true. And in the context of the seven factors of awakening, we are cultivating mindfulness in order to cultivate awakening. And for me, when I see it or hear it in that context, I feel motivated, more motivated. We are cultivating awakening when we cultivate mindfulness. And so this is the Buddha's, the last instruction I'll offer is just the instruction from the Satipatthana Sutta again for development of the first of mindfulness, this factor of awakening. And the Buddha says, there being mindfulness, the practitioner can look for whether there is mindfulness as a factor of awakening present within them. And if there is, they can discern there is mindfulness as a factor of awakening present within me. This is actually the first task. To see, is the factor of mindfulness present within me? So we often can see, mindfulness is here. Yeah, we're going to do this, but I can just take it for granted. But what we're doing is the first action that the Buddha invited us into is mindfulness as a factor of awakening present within me. And then this Satipatthana Sutta goes on to say, or there being no mindfulness as a factor for awakening present within, they can discern mindfulness as a factor of awakening is not present within me. And what happens as soon as we do that? We have mindfulness as a factor of awakening present. So in this guided meditation, check it out for yourself. Is mindfulness present? And if it's not, as soon as you turn to it, is it present then? As soon as you remember, is it present then? And then what fruit? The Buddha goes, actually, I'm going to read one more thing. I am giving kind of half my talk here, but I want to do that because it just puts the practice in a different context. Here's what the Buddha says about the power of mindfulness in terms of the 7 factors. So the Buddha says in the Anguttara Nikaya, practitioners, I know not of one other single thing. I don't know any other single thing of such power to cause the arising of good thoughts if they haven't risen yet, or to cause the waning of unwholesome thoughts if they have already arisen as mindfulness. In him or her who is mindful, good thoughts not yet arisen do arise. And unwholesome thoughts, if arisen, do wane. This is what we're learning in the fourth foundation of mindfulness. This is what we're cultivating. How to support wholesome factors to rise and how to support unwholesome ones to wane. And so the Buddha says, I know of no other single thing as powerful as mindfulness to cause the arising of wholesome factors and the diminishment of unwholesome. You know, I take mindfulness for granted. He's saying it's one of the biggest superpowers. One of our biggest superpowers that we have. You didn't know that you had a hidden superpower. I bet. We all do. So in this meditation, just check it out. Check it out. See what happens. See if you can discern, is mindfulness present? That's no small thing to discern. And then see if you can discern what fruits rise if mindfulness is present. What fruits rise? And I will ask you, I will do a little exploration of that at the end of the meditation and then as we come back to the group. So with this in our hearts and our minds, settling into the sense of mindfulness of the body. Mindfulness of the body. And now, just as you're turning to mindfulness of the body, just feel in, was mindfulness present in this same way just 10 seconds ago? Before I asked you to be mindful? Even as I was talking, I was here, I was present with you. But when I just said, let's turn with mindfulness to the body, mindfulness rose in a different way for me. And so there's one of the arising factors, right? Or one of the conditions right there, simply to have mindfulness rise is simply to remember it, turn to it intentionally. And so settling into mindfulness of the body. Sensing your whole body sitting. Sensing this amazing capacity now, asking yourself, is mindfulness present now? And sensing mindfulness. We can bring our mindfulness closer to the body, sensing into the feet. Mindfulness of the feet. Contact with the floor. And sensing mindfulness of the calves and the knees and the thighs. Sensing the hips, contact with the couch or the chair. Mindfulness of the back, how it's contacting the chair. And just noticing again, is mindfulness present here? feeling into the belly, sensing the chest, perhaps rising, falling with the breath. Feeling into the shoulders. Just noticing mindfulness present here with the shoulders. Sensing down the arms and the hands. Mindfulness of the tingling, pressure and warmth or coolness in the hands. And sensing into the neck and the back of the head and the top of the head. Feeling into the face. And sensing, inviting the whole face to soften. And sensing and being mindful of the whole body again, from head to toe. And sensing the breath inside the body. And just again asking, is mindfulness present? Noticing this quality of mindfulness that helps you to be here, connected with experience. And just making a little intention for the sit to be aware, noticing when mindfulness is present and when it's not. No judgment. The mind will move away and get lost in thinking. When it comes back, we can just make a little note. Oh, mindfulness was absent. Now it's present. And then you can bring mindfulness back to this anchor of the body and the breath. And this noticing of absence and presence of mindfulness is one of the first or foundational mental activities that the Buddha invites us to practice. Let's just see what happens as we practice with this mindfulness of the body and the breath. This simple remembrance of mindfulness, which then causes mindfulness to arise. And then the turning again and again to mindfulness when the mind comes into presence is foundational to cultivating or developing this quality of mindfulness. Just resting back, just noticing presence and absence. Resting into mindfulness of the body and the breath. And this mindfulness is a kind of receptive quality, receiving the sensations of the body and the breath. So letting the body be easy, relaxed. And then from this place of ease, letting the active part, the active reflection rise of discerning the absence and presence of mindfulness. And this movement of resting back into the anchor with ease. No need to worry about the mind being lost in thought and mindfulness being absent. No need to worry. The Buddha has said that that is completely normal. The mind will get lost in a train of thinking and then return to mindfulness all by itself. And then we can intentionally work with that mindfulness, come back to the anchor. And in doing that, notice what happens to the train of thought. Is it temporarily at least abandoned? Is it temporarily stopped? Mindfulness has that power to interrupt the trains of thought. Even just for a moment. And then what happens with your mindfulness? What happens when you direct it to the anchor, even if that's just for half a breath? Directing it to the breath and the body and resting there. Is there the rise of a little sense of something wholesome there? A little rise of a sense of some kind of resting. Being curious about how mindfulness can interrupt or abandon unskillful patterns or unskillful um, trains of thinking, and how it can support or cultivate wholesome qualities. Just being curious about that as we continue to rest our mindfulness in the anchor. Noticing the absence of mindfulness, what happens when the mind comes back, the attention comes back into presence. And resting back again into the anchor. Just checking gently into your experience. Are there any wholesome factors, fruits that have arisen during this time of mindfulness? Any qualities such as calmness or relaxation, softness, slowing down, anything wholesome that has arisen. And through your practice of mindfulness, are there any unhelpful qualities that have diminished in any way? A sense of agitation, a sense of going fast, a sense of high energy, anything that has diminished. And noticing that these qualities as fruits of your mindfulness practice. There may be a sense of the busy mind and more of an awareness of the busy mind, or more of an awareness of agitation. And this can be a fruit as well, seeing just a rise of clear seeing, a rise of connection with what's here, even though it may not be completely pleasant. Sensing into whatever wholesomeness is here now as you open your eyes. And just staying connected to whatever feels wholesome as you open the eyes. And staying connected to the sense in the body. And so I want to be cautious as we do this kind of exploration, because I don't want to invite too much striving into our mindfulness meditation. But I do get excited about the sense that meditation has an active quality. This active quality of discerning whether qualities are present or absent. And this quality of also how do we cultivate and sustain wholesome qualities. These are actions, subtle activities in the mind and heart. But it may serve you to feel into meditation as an active activity. I feel like it can keep me awake, and can keep me connected to what's happening, knowing that I have an active part in it. Sometimes I can get a bit spaced out and a bit kind of resting back a lot, but knowing this active part is there can keep me present, keep me awake, even when I'm tired. There's a little active part there. And so we can combine this mindfulness, this quality of mindfulness, with all of the other factors of awakening. So we can combine the two. And I want to read now what the Buddha says about mindfulness and equanimity. We'll stick with mindfulness and equanimity primarily today, and then move on to another factor next week. Mindfulness being the first one and equanimity being the last one. And this is what the Buddha says about bringing these two together in the 7 factors. And so this is also from the Satipatthana Sutta, the 4th foundation. And the Buddha says, how does one remain focused on mental qualities in and of themselves with reference to the 7 factors of awakening? So how do we do this? And so here he's going to go on to talk about, for example, we could focus on equanimity as a factor for awakening. And a practitioner discerns, first of all, that equanimity as a factor for awakening is present within me. Or there being no mindfulness as a factor for awakening, no equanimity as a factor for awakening present within, the practitioner discerns equanimity as a factor for awakening is not present within me. And this is our first action, our first mental action. And just as I'm speaking, I'm feeling inspired about it, because we can again take this for granted. Oh yeah, equanimity is not here, or it's here. But this is a profound mental action that the Buddha says has profound implications. Noticing, is it present? Is it absent? Because what can happen as we discern that is that then we bring in the balancing, that's our activity, and then there can be kind of the system balances itself. Oh, I could use some more equanimity. I really need some in this area. Or yes, it's here, and as we pay attention to it being here, it increases. And as we notice it's not here, then mindfulness automatically knows we can cultivate it. So it's like this self-balancing system almost. And so goes on to say, discerning, the practitioner discerns how there is the arising of unrisen equanimity, so how we can cultivate equanimity. And then the practitioner can discern how to develop or continue to develop equanimity. And so we're really being tuned into this factor, these factors of mindfulness and equanimity that allow us to discern, is one present or not, and then how to cultivate it. And so this is what helps us to balance the mind and the heart, to plant the seeds in the garden of equanimity, of mindfulness, and allow them to grow. And then that supports the balance in the mind that can open the door to release and liberation and freedom. And so last week, I offered 2 practices for developing equanimity. And I'm going to just recap those. The first was to borrow equanimity. And this again is like we're bringing mindfulness and equanimity together, because we're mindful that we want to cultivate equanimity. These 2 qualities come together. So we're mindful, so we can borrow it. And I asked us to think about a person who has equanimity, and just by feeling into that person. Last week, I had people put in the chat what you felt like in your body when you brought in actively a person who for you has equanimity. And you could do that right now. I won't ask you to put it in the chat, but we can recap that and just feel into a person. Bring them to mind, a person that you feel has equanimity. Mindfully directing our attention in order to rise to cause the arising of equanimity. So see what happens as you feel into this person. See if what happened last week happens this week. If equanimity arises in you in any way. And then the second practice I asked us to feel into last week was to notice the ways that equanimity might be here more present than you think they are, or more frequently than you think they are. So I asked us to feel into a time that you experienced equanimity. So do that now. And I'm going to ask us for some feedback on this one. Feel into a time now that you felt equanimity. Feeling into the areas of your life, perhaps, that you have more equanimity. And feeling, what does it feel like? How do you recognize equanimity? What does it feel like when you notice or remember a time? What happens in your body and your being? And so just for those who wish to share, maybe there's 2 or 3 or 4 people or more who can type a word in the chat box again about what that feels like when you bring up a time you felt equanimity. What happens for you? I'll give you just a minute to type anything in there. And so I'm going to read what we have here, and this is an interesting collective description of the universal qualities that can come from this practice of turning towards times of equanimity. And so we have acceptance, a calmness, a steadiness, balance, without stress, like a duck sitting in the ocean, and also someone's remembering when they had a health issue but felt calm about it. And so this is similar to what happened last week. This is the second week in a row we've been able to cultivate equanimity simply by turning our mindfulness to it. And so I want to go one step further this week and invite us to a third practice. This is the last practice. I'll ask you for a chat once more on this one, see what happens. So the first 2 practices were to borrow equanimity. The second practice, notice when it's here and see what happens, or notice times we've had it and see what happens. And then the third practice is to call it up into times when we don't have it and see what happens. So we have the experience in our body of what it feels like to feel into a time of equanimity. And now I'm going to ask you to feel into areas in your life where you could use more equanimity. And I thought of 4 of them that came quite quickly to my mind today as I was doing this exercise. And I had settled into the feeling of equanimity from noticing it in my life. And then I felt into these areas where I felt like I could use it more. And I'm going to ask you to imagine, I'm going to tell you what happened. And what I did was I imagined myself in those activities and how it would be different if I could bring this equanimity, call this equanimity into those situations. And there are 4 situations that are quite simple. One is when I wake up. And when I wake up, I can get into a tizzy very quickly. But feeling into the time of waking up, I felt like, what would I do differently? I know exactly what I would do. I would sit right away. I would not spend 20 minutes, half an hour in bed, letting the mind spin. So that helped me to know what I would do differently with my equanimity. Second time is getting going to bed. When I go to bed, if I don't have my equanimity there, it's really easy for me to actually, I will confess this, be in bed and I got my phone. Oh, let's check the news. Wait a second. If I've got my equanimity, I can feel right away, like right now, there's no phone in the bedroom. There's no checking the news just before bedtime. It feels so solid that I know that. Another one is making meals. How often I can get off track with that. But as I feel into that time of needing equanimity, making meals, suddenly, bang, bingo. It was just, yeah, I know, they're on time, they're nourishing. And I just have a sense, I just want to do it. In fact, I think I just got up and made a meal as I was feeling into this today. A nourishing meal. The other time is grocery shopping. Grocery shopping, easy for me to get discombobulated, easy for me to be like a zombie in the grocery store. When I felt into that scenario, I thought, no, I've got my grocery list and it's nourishing to go grocery shopping. And so I can feel that difference in my body. I had wanted to invite you all to do that, but I don't know what happened tonight. The time just got away on me. So I'm not going to invite you to chat into the chat room about that, but feel into that this week when you come into a time when you notice that there is an absence of equanimity. This is the activity the Buddha invited us into. Absence of equanimity, then see, how can I cultivate it? And one of the ways to cultivate it is remember when you had it, and then sense what would I do differently now? Bringing that in. You could do that in your imagination ahead of time. It's been very powerful for me to feel into those areas where I do not have as much equanimity as I want to, and bring it in, see what happens. And so I'll leave you with that, this sense that this practice can be active. And we can have fun with it. Bring it into those times with our mindfulness, our equanimity. Bring those 2 factors of awakening alive in your life, in those moments when this week you might notice equanimity is needed. So let's stop there, friends, and sense into equanimity in your body and your being. What does that feel like as we settle in and dedicate the merit of our practice? So may the merit of our practice ripple out and support all beings. And as we learn more deeply about how to put causes and conditions into play through the factors of awakening, how we learn more about how to give rise to wholesome conditions through the factors of awakening, may this ripple out and be a cause for liberation, a cause and condition for liberation in the minds and hearts of all beings. May our practice ripple out for the benefit of all beings everywhere. Thank you, friends.